I first want to welcome everyone and congratulate you on maybe stepping out of your comfort zone a little bit. I think, having outdoor recreation as a topic at a Forest Industry Summit is, not the most streamlined thing. So congrats to you guys, because it may seem odd, but myself and the panelists that I'm joined by, we believe that outdoor recreation and the forest industry really is the new working landscape. And, oh, Dave, perfect, so front row. And that there is incredible synergy between the two industries. And we are going to provide a lot of examples. So I'll be your moderator today. My name's Abby Long. I'm the executive director for the Kingdom Trail Association. And you are, no joke, literally surrounded by 100+ miles of Kingdom Trails right now. We're a nonprofit trail organization located here in Burke, also Lyndonville, Kirby, and we've even crossed the county lines over to Essex County's East Haven. We are a mission-driven organization, and basically every day we're dedicated to fostering the health of our community, the surrounding environment, and our regional economy by managing, maintaining, and building trails. But before I go any further, I always love to share that our trails are made possible by 104 private landowners that so generously offer their properties for our trails. And it's my own neighbors. Burke Mountain is actually one of our largest landowners that see that vision and see that asset and see the positive impact that outdoor recreation is having on their very own communities. It's funny, even in 1994 when Kingdom Trails was founded, we were actually founded off of old logging roads. And another awesome example is in the downtown East Burke hub, Mike's Tiki Bar. It provides parking for the trail network. Mike is able to sell some beers, there's food truck, there's supporting infrastructure like bathrooms and showers for the trail users, but on the backside of that Tiki Bar is a productive sawmill. So it's just one example, and our panelists are going to share so many other examples of how the two industries intersect with each other. So with that, I am going to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, but I do want you to know that Kingdom Trails and all of our panelists, their businesses, are members of VOBA. And hi guys. Come on in. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad. This looks so journey. So what I was sharing is that our panelists and myself, Kingdom Trails Association, are members of VOBA, which is the Vermont Outdoor Business Alliance. And VOBA is actually the host of this panel. So VOBA is a statewide nonprofit organization, and they represent Vermont's outdoor businesses. They work to educate Vermonters about outdoor recreation opportunities and to educate Vermont outdoor businesses on development initiatives, collaborative opportunities, and policy. And that they truly are dedicated to strengthening, expanding, attracting, and retaining outdoor recreation economy businesses in the state. So, come on in, Mike.
Is this a climate one?
No, outdoor recreation though, a lot more fun.
I'm trying to find it.
So now I'm going to give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves, and do know that there'll be plenty of time towards the end for Q&A. But to begin, outdoor recreation opportunities and businesses, they have a unique connection to Vermont's forests, whether it's building trails in them, building skis in them, or building just anything to enjoy the outdoors. Therefore, I'm going to let each of these guys begin by having them tell a little bit about themselves, their business, and then the linkages with Vermont's forest landscape. So, Ben, you're in the hot seat.
Okay. My name is Ben Ferrasi. I live in Hyde Park. My business is White Room Skis. I am a custom it's a part-time business. I'm a custom ski builder. You can see up against the wall there some examples of some new skis that I've brought with me today. So I started building skis back in 2010 as just a hobby, and it sort of took on a life of its own after I would get literally sometimes per day, hundreds of questions in lift line of like, how do I get a pair of those? How much are those? Where'd you get those? Utah? No, I built them just down the road. And I saw an opportunity because at that point in time, there were no other, maybe one other custom ski builder selling skis in Vermont. And to date, there are only maybe 4 or 5 ski builders in Vermont, and only 2 of them build skis in Vermont. Okay, me being one of them. So now this has kind of evolved into this, business that exactly intersects that forest industry. As you see here, the top sheet is wood veneer. Now that's something I would love to source in Vermont, which I'm at this time not able to. But what you can't see are the guts of the ski. And it's a solid hardwood core made from ash and poplar. And I have to source some of that from outside Vermont. But that's kind of how my business intersects the forest industry, is wood veneer and the core of the ski. I use as much wood as I can that is sourced in Vermont. So that's a little bit about me and my product.
We'll go down the line. So go ahead,
Down the
Zach.
line. Yes, hi, my name is Zach Freeman. I'm the owner of Apex Trail Works based in Randolph, Vermont. I'm born and raised here in Vermont, and have been building trails since I was a small kid in my folks' backyard. I helped co-found the outdoor recreation group, ROSTA, the Rochester Randolph Area Sports Trails Alliance, which has since changed their name to the Ridgeline Outdoor Collective. And we are a volunteer organization that has projects that stretch across the central Vermont area on both state land, municipal land, and on federal land as well. I have since stepped out from under the club and formed my trail contracting business, and I strive to be a voice of overlap between the forestry and the logging industry and the trail contracting industry. I think there's incredible value and added benefit of working together, and I am a voice that's outside of this group here today. As Terry said, I think it's incredibly valuable to include those voices in the conversations, and so I am trying to do that today, and I've built both mechanical and hand-built trails, and the infrastructure that goes along with that, the woodworking, the kiosks, and the infrastructure involved in that. So more on that later. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Zach. Hi, I'm Sam Hooper. I'm the owner of a company called Vermont Glove down in Randolph, Vermont. We make goat leather work gloves for trade professionals, a lot of loggers and foresters, but as well as power line workers. We also make gloves for the consumer industry. We've been around since 1920. I took over ownership of the business back in 2018 with the desire to reposition the brand in the modern market and leverage our position of quality to be a values-driven brand that people want to invest in. And our intersectionality with the forest industry is the fact that we're a main consumer of it. We are a net zero manufacturer, and we heat our factory with solar power and biomass wood pellets. We're a huge advocate of the industry that you guys work in, and we make gloves that help this industry. Zach wears our gloves, and Hal wears our gloves. Mike wears our gloves. So it's a high quality product that's built to last, just like most of the woods products in the industry, and we look forward to having a further conversation around how we fit into the whole mold.
My name's Hal Elms, and my company is Pinnacle Outdoor Group. We're a manufacturer's rep agency in the outdoor industry. It's based in Middlesex, is where I live, and we operate in 10 northeastern states. So what we do as manufacturers reps is we represent national brands and and basically help them sell their goods and get their goods into stores. Everybody from LL Bean to the stores here in Burke, and many stores I'm sure you're all familiar with across New England. And I've been in the outdoor industry for 40 years now. I started working in an outdoor gear shop when I got out of high school in 1982, and found it to be just a wonderful bunch of people, honestly, to work with. And everybody wanted to have fun and go out and do cool things. And so I stuck with it. And here I am 40 years later. My company, Pinnacle Outdoor Group, has been around for 25 years, doing this, working on the wholesale side of the business. And I've been scratching my head as to how my company really directly intersects with the forest products industry. And my company doesn't directly do that, but it does in so much as without the forests, we would not have much of our $2.6 billion outdoor industry that we have here in Vermont. So the forests are all absolutely key to that. And so I guess to that end, I wouldn't have a job if it weren't for the forests, actually. But I also do connect with it as a landowner of timberland, as well as I heat my house with wood as well. So hoping to figure out now how we, in these two industries, can work much more closely, because it sort of struck me as I was thinking this all through over the week that I'm surprised we haven't had more of this conversation, because what y'all do is crucial to what we do. So I'm anxious to talk about that some more.
Thank you all for introducing yourself. So I'm going to dive right in because you've intrigued us and we want to know more details now. So as we've expressed, the outdoor recreation industry and the forest products industry have a lot of similarities in their needs, but also maybe even in their challenges. Maybe these similarities are with our workforce training, but also in where we're supplying our materials. So I'd love to hear about your experiences with that. Anyone want to go first?
Sure.
Sam.
Yeah, sure.
Should have just called them.
So with our products made out of goat leather, our supply chain is domestic, is primarily in the United States, and the vast majority of it is in the Northeast U.S. So tri-state and New England area, and Ontario and Quebec. And so a lot of times we get questions in customer service at the glove company that, are you raising goats just to kill them to make them into gloves? It's like, no, you can't cost effectively raise an animal just to make them into leather. It doesn't work like that. So we're a byproduct of existing industries already. And we take a lot of pride in that sustainability model of trying to use 100% of the goat. And we actually have a localized version of that right in our community, Randolph, where we have a farm nearby our factory that raises goats and produces milk, and that milk gets made into cheese, and that milk also gets made into goat's milk caramel. From there, the animal is raised and culled to keep the health of the herd alive, and then it's raised for meat, and then it's sold under a brand called Vermont Siobhan. Once we process that animal, then we go and we salt those hides and we send them out to one of our producers to be made into a genuine leather material that we can make back into a product. And we even use the bone marrow that goes into Joe's Kitchen down in Middlesex that's made into soup. So we have a lot of pride in land stewardship, sustainability, and sourcing our materials as local as possible. With that said, we're a handmade product. We make everything in our factory in Randolph. We have 10 employees in production right now. We're growing every day, looking for more employees. But our Achilles heel is 100% access to skilled workforce. And so we are having to develop workforce as we grow. And that means that we need to create community and environment that welcomes new Americans and folks from other parts of the country to come to Vermont and want to participate in what we have to offer. Randolph is dead center, geographic center of Vermont. We're a rural community, so we rely on our recreation activities to entice people to want to live in our community. So we leverage that a lot in our hiring process, and there's a little bit more that I'll get into, but I don't want to take up too much airtime here. So pass it over last to.
So, talking about supply chain stuff, I do source a lot of my lumber here in Vermont and source as much as I can. One of the biggest components of the cores of my skis is ash. And with the ash borer getting closer and closer every year, that is a concern of mine. I've talked to some of my lumber suppliers who say pretty soon there's not going to be much ash lumber because people are just going to harvest before the ash borer arrives. So that's a concern of mine as far as supply chain and health of the forest. And I guess that even probably relates to climate change, maybe because it's more hospitable to that bug. I don't know. But that's a big concern in the coming years for me is the availability of quality ash lumber.
Can I ask, this might be a no-brainer to our audience, but for someone not as familiar, what makes you choose the type of wood you do for your ski?
So I choose the ash lumber because of its qualities. It's usually very straight grained. It's easier to work with. It doesn't tend to warp as either rough cut or dressed lumber. It stays pretty stable. And then its flex qualities of the ski, it's a very lively wood. That's why they make baseball bats out of it. It tends to be dense and holds screws well when we're talking about binding retention. So those are just a few of the reasons I would choose ash lumber. I have in the past used maple. Maple is a totally different wood though. Maple will warp much more than the ash will. It's much heavier, which is not as advantageous in my skis. Most of my customers want usually a lighter ski for backcountry. I do use a little bit of maple for exactly that property in some skis though. I want a denser, stiffer ski, something that's a little damp. As far as vibration goes, I would choose that. So,
That's
your
amazing.
question.
Yes, thank you so much. Zach?
As far as supply chain goes, trail contracting doesn't really, there's no real direct relationship to supply chain issues. That's your question.
What about those bridges you built?
Well, the bridges, I was speaking,
earlier this season.
okay, I was speaking today to Sam on a ride about the cedar that you guys have here, and it's amazing that you guys have the amount of cedar in the woods that grows that can be used on the spot. In other areas that we don't have the species that hold up over time, you need to bring in wood and schlep wood in sometimes miles to make a bridge. Sometimes in the Northwest, it's nice that you can use the cedar that's in the woods. It's older growth, it splits really well, they can make the bridges and the features out of that. The supply chain issues don't really directly affect the bridge construction and the infrastructure construction because the local sawmills have a pretty good supply. And so we do rely heavily on the local sawmills to supply the hemlock. We primarily use hemlock for bridge infrastructure. Sometimes clients would like pressure treated, which is not ideal, but that's the long-term sustainable wood. And so we try and steer towards hemlock the best we can. We don't really have in the Randolph area, Central Vermont area, there's not an abundance of cedar. If there was cedar or locust, we would use it. I rely heavily on the locally sourced sawmill materials.
Thank you, Zach. Al?
Well, I guess what I would offer is in our outdoor industry and the folks that I work with in the industry, my customers essentially, which are the retail stores throughout New England, that they're seeing the same challenges that many industries are. It's really, really, really hard to find people to work. And the supply chain also is a huge issue. Sadly, many of the products that our outdoor industry uses come from a long way away. just west of San Francisco, as people like to joke about. So the challenges of getting goods around the world have been enormous over the last 2 to 3 years. And so that's had a real impact on the folks' ability to have inventory. So at a local bike shop, say here in Burke, they've had real trouble getting bicycles, bicycle parts, things like that. And then also getting the people that know how to work on and fix, build the bikes, things like that. So I think every industry is experiencing this. Nobody's really immune to this supply chain issue or the skilled labor issue. And I think it's going to be an ongoing, situation that we all have to deal with. And I think one of the solutions I might offer is if we think about in the future how we teach people these skills and when we teach people these skills. And if these are skills that can be taught in a technical sense, maybe in high schools, where we have great programs now for folks that want to become electricians or plumbers and such, which are all vital to the housing that we all need too. We have a lot of issues that we're facing here. But I believe that if we had technical programs in high school that accommodated heavy equipment repair, because I have to believe that fixing an excavator maybe for Zach is not unlike fixing a skidder when it breaks. And so these skills are really transferable. And I throw this out there just as something to think about in your own communities on how we can better provide people with the skills and the technical training they need, but at younger ages, and get young people to stay in Vermont and have these skills that will help our forest products industries, our recreation industries, really frankly every industry. So again, I'm not totally, my business isn't really directly related to any of these supply chain issues, but my customers are. And so I guess that does make me pretty directly impacted by it. And yeah, I think that's what I would offer.
Thanks, Hal, for touching upon the workforce development aspect of that question. Something I'm really proud of is Kingdom Trails has recently partnered with our local NVU campus in Lyndonville with a trail building, a 2-day trail building curriculum. And they'll be able to sign up, and they have hands-on experience with KT's own crew on our trails, so KT's benefiting a little bit by getting some trail work done. But they're getting an official professional training and a certificate at the end of this course. And then, quite frankly, it's a pipeline. We're hoping to then hire them immediately after. Another thing that Hal spoke to the lower ages is KT helps fund Project Bike Tech, which is in Linden Institute, our local high school here. And those kids are graduating high school with their diploma, but also a certificate in bike maintenance. So that's not directly impacting KT. We're not hiring mechanics, but we have 2 bike shops in town that we need in order to get people out on our trails and enjoying and having a healthy, active life. And again, hoping that they stick around and stay in the kingdom.
It's literally the most sought after job right now in the outdoor industry is a bicycle mechanic. Mm-hmm. Nobody can find bicycle mechanics.
Yeah. Sam, do you have anything about, I'm curious about your workforce.
Yeah, so workforce development is our Achilles heel. It's the thing from day one that I knew was going to be our biggest challenge. There's not industrial sellers. You probably don't know a lot of people with a resume that has industrial selling experience on it. So we're having to create that workforce. And because that's been such a challenge, and with the housing crisis going on, we've actually leaned in and turned into having to invest in our own housing for our employees, so that way we can become more attractive and open up the opportunity for someone to come to Randolph. So we've recently invested in an old residential care facility that was not part of Randolph's housing stock, and we are in the process of transitioning that into apartment units for our employees. And one of the most interesting aspects of this transition is, like, we're not trying to create, we don't want to be slumlords. We have a responsibility to make a really good living environment for these employees so that we can retain them. And part of that has been pulling our fossil fuel usage from that building in order to make it also another net zero facility heated by renewable wood pellets and biomass. And I'm happy to say this supply chain shortage is real. You guys probably have heard about it with what's going on in Europe, with the energy crisis. Pellet boilers are not being shipped to the US anymore. I think we might have gotten the last one in the United States. And so we're really proud of that, self-centeredly. But it's clear that there is a massive need to turn to the wood products industry and biomass industry to level economies and deal with our carbon sequestration.
Then you're a one-man show, right?
I am,
Yeah.
my business is, I'm a micro business. I am a one-man show. I'm the web guy, I'm the ski designer, I'm the janitor, I'm the accountant, I'm everything about my business. So I don't have workforce issues, only my own time.
Good.
I'm limited by my own
Take care
time.
of yourself.
Well, I think in the boom that we've all felt in outdoor recreation, there's been a desire and push to build more trails and to get more folks out there. And with that has come state funding. And with that state funding has come more trail projects. And arguably there's more funding than there are hands right now to build the trail. And so there's a lot more youth that are coming into this industry right now that kind of dovetail into the forest products industry, and they're learning the balance of ecological integrity and recreation and the importance of that, and trying to balance that so it's not, so the scales don't outrage each other. I think it's super important. The youth in our area, we've all seen this enormous uptick in youth mountain bike teams, both in schools and communities. And with that, those youth are engaging in these conversations with trail builders, with trail organizers, and sometimes in the forestry and the logging industry as well. And to retain that youth within our state to help grow all of these sectors will make Vermont stronger and a more desirable place to live. So it's great to see the youth getting more and more involved.
Thank you, guys. So more similarities between the two industries. I'd love to highlight the economic impact, especially in rural communities in Vermont. So I'd love to hear how maybe your businesses have been an anchor about, an economic driver, community vitality, and even had positive impacts maybe when it comes to public health, or even played a role in education in your own communities.
Sure. I have a question actually for all of you. Is anybody familiar with the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, or VOREC? Because that's kind of a mouthful.
I am not.
All right, so I want to talk a little bit about that, because again, that's sort of how how this question sort of struck me. Is I wear a couple of hats. I wear the hat that I described earlier as a business person in Pinnacle Outdoor Group, but I also serve on the VOREC steering committee, which is the governor's steering committee that's made up of representatives from the quote for-profit outdoor business, such as myself. But it's also made up of representatives from the Trails and Greenways Council. It's also made up with folks such as Abby Long, our moderator, as well as folks from the nonprofit world, such as the Trust for Public Lands. So the goal in creating this, and I also should point out that this has been really spearheaded and chaired as our Commissioner Michael Snyder is the chair of this steering committee. And so the goal when we created the steering committee was to make things work more efficiently, to understand that recreation has an impact on all of our different communities across the state. Again, it's about a $2.6 billion industry, depending on whose numbers you believe. But so it's a big part of what Vermont is. And again, it's a big part of that is against this forested backdrop that everybody loves. We all love it. It's why people come here. I'm struck with how many places I go in the country and people find out I'm from Vermont and they instantly say, I love Vermont. I've never been there. but I just love them. and it happens on a regular basis, and I find that to be fascinating. So I guess I put that out there as the brand of Vermont, if you will, which is, I know of no stronger brand really out there. It's 100% positive when you talk to people, when you travel, it seems. But back to this Vermont Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, which does have the word economy in its name. So it's definitely, the point of this thing is to create opportunities for communities around outdoor recreation to build those economies. There's probably no better example of it than here in Burke. And what Abby and her team has done, and folks before her over the years, have created this unbelievable economic machine here, centered again around, well, as I've heard Commissioner Snyder say, the forest here producing not only boards and cords, but miles of smiles on the bike trails. And so I think that's a really interesting way to look at it, because it's not just happening here in Burke, it's happening in Randolph, it's happening in Poultney, it's happening all over. One of the things that the Vermont Outdoor Rec Collaborative manages is a grant program. And you may have seen some of this in the news recently. We just concluded a grant round where we had 104 applicants for applying for around $5 million worth of community stimulus money to build trails, to create signage, to create workforce development programs in their communities. And so that's one of the big things that the Vermont Outdoor Recreation Collaborative administers. But it also, and I'm just going to ask your indulgence as I read this, because my memory is better than it has any right to be, but still not all that good. The VOREC Steering Committee's purpose is to engage with businesses, government, the nonprofit sector, and the public to identify specific outcomes that promote business opportunities, increase participation opportunities, and strengthen the quality and stewardship of our recreational resources. And so that's kind of an overview of what we think about in this VOREC program. And I think that the forest products industry fits right in there perfectly, because again, without the forests, without the well-managed forests that we have, the brand of Vermont wouldn't be what it is today. I'm sure of that. And it wouldn't be what we see now with this $2.6 billion of revenue that it brings in. So I'm also going to just steal more quotes here. It's speaking about community. When we created the Outdoor Recreation Economic Collaborative, we held 4 listening sessions all around the state, different diverse communities, and solicited opinions and views from folks in those communities. And that word community kept coming up over and over again. And so this was established in 2017, is when Governor Scott signed this into executive order. And so as I've thought about it over these last 3 or 4 years, the word community, again, continues to come up. And it's community that is connecting communities to trails, creating healthier communities, making communities that are more economically prosperous. And these are all great things. But when we look at that definition of community, what we see when we look it up in the dictionary is, one, it's a group of people living in the same place. Or number 2, a feeling of fellowship with others as a result of sharing common attitudes, interests, and goals, which I think we can all agree are all very good things. But then I also wanted to point out too, and steal some smart words from a guy, although Leopold, the noted land ethicist, and he speaks about his land ethic and the land, and a definition of community around that. And what he says about this is, quote, "The land ethic simply enlarges the boundaries of the community to include soils, waters, plants, and animals, or collectively, the land." And so I think that our work around VOREC and increasingly my work around different projects is thinking about community in that way, that we're all connected, everything's connected. And a logging operation is producing just as much economic value, maybe more, to certain communities than, say, a bike trail will. But bike trails can also exist in that same atmosphere. And so I think that it's just so important to think about communities in this way. We can do it here in Vermont because we're so small, and people really are, everybody does really know everybody. And towns can have just such a big impact on, from either a new mountain bike trail or some new forest product. And so I think that when we think about community, it's all of those things. It's creating healthier communities through economic development, and that can be economic development around forest products or recreation. And so I just offer that as a way to think about everything we do moving forward, is that community aspect of it. That it's more than just, it's more than some streets clustered together. Because the bugs and the animals and all of those, they don't know whether they're in Burke or East Haven. It's all just the land to them. And so, I guess what I'm driving at here is that these things are all so valuable that we've got to take care of them, and we all have to be aware of how our impacts on the land affect all of these local communities. Whether it's even just putting a little narrow mountain bike trail in is a disruption to the forest. And so that's what I have to say about that. Yeah.
Well, I can dovetail right in there. Very familiar with the VOREC program. The town of Randolph and Ridgeline Outdoor Collective was honored to be the very first recipient of the VOREC award in the end of 2018 and 19. As I'm not sure if anybody has been to Randolph, we're a very small blue-collar town, and the VOREC program had an immense impact on our community. It was a broad-reaching application that was multifaceted, and it funded projects everywhere from an outdoor trail hub, which was the renovation of an old building in Randolph that is now a mountain bike shop, and a trail hub room with maps and other info, trail projects, events. We started a youth mountain bike team club in town, and the trickle-down effect from that funding has reached beyond what we had first planned on, and that is other events in town that are based around forest and the recreation components. And then also other economic development, other restaurants and other businesses have moved to Randolph because of the work that we're doing. And so I applaud everybody's vision, everybody that's been involved in that program, the comprehensive approach and the thought that's gone into that is wide-ranging across the state now. And it's wonderful to see this happening in other communities. We're just one small example on a micro scale of, the shining example is the community that we're in right now, of the overlap between the forest and the recreation component. Fast forwarding a little bit, it's kind of funny that you quoted Leopold, because I held an event last night that was recreation, trails, and ecological integrity at our local bike shop. And we brought in a local forester, Carl Russell, who shared his thoughts on how we can balance both recreation, the forest industry, and sustain and manage and hopefully increase the ecological integrity of our forests. And I quoted Leopold and the thinking community about how everything is connected. Sometimes this world is increasingly segregated and divided, but at the core, the roots of everything around us, everything's connected. And it all has an effect. That sometimes it's a trickle-down effect from forestry to logging to recreation and conservation. And the more overlap and the more voices in the room, in the planning and the development and even the execution stage, I think we can all be more efficient and in the end be more sustainable and working together in this arena. So it's great to have everybody involved in this, and honored to be here too. So thank you.
My contributions are again, my business is much smaller. My contributions in some ways are much smaller. As far as education, the education part of it is probably where I contribute the most, and not on a large scale, but with individuals. I've had probably over the years, I get about one or two, probably one a year. I usually get a high school student that contacts me that wants to come and build his own set of skis for like his senior capstone project or something like that. So, I've actually developed a little, I used to teach some college classes at what used to be Johnson State, and I developed a little syllabus almost that they had to kind of follow, that they could present to their instructor at school, and I talked to them actually about chemistry, the chemistry of the epoxy. I talked to them about the properties of the wood, about the science of adhesion to the wood and the plastics and all these things. So I wouldn't call myself a community anchor in that way, but as far as influencing some young people, as far as hopefully. And actually, there was one or two that have gone on to one young man had his own business for a couple of years, so it's actually been kind of fun to be a part of that. And it's in a smaller way, but it's still, it's all connected.
I would just say that we try to push the envelope and be an example of what can be done economically, but also environmentally, be an environmental steward. We take our carbon footprint very seriously in our business, and we want to do everything we can to sequester that as best we can. And since having switched from running our factory on coal to then biomass, and now this residential facility from oil to biomass, the real value that I think we bring as a manufacturer and an employer is that we are showing an example to other businesses that you can do this and you can make ends meet. You can do this with a return on investment. So since having done our factory project, I think we've helped about 8 or 9 other businesses transition to wood pellets because we gave them the roadmap, we gave them the playbook to say, here's where the incentive is, here's where you're going to get the return on investment, here's your initial investment, and here's what you can expect in the long run. And that's a really cool thing in this global energy issue right now, with the fact that we're supporting a local product. We're getting something that's coming out of Vermont. It's not coming from across the world. So we feel really good about that. And it sounds like, from after listening to the keynote speech, that there's a little bit of a PR issue in the forest products industry, and we want to do our part as a business to help bring the horse to water, to help them understand that these aren't just clear-cutting activities. These are multifaceted economies that have a lot of intersectionality.
And I can share a little bit about KT's perspective. We have some economic impact numbers. In 2016, we were really fortunate to take part in a Vermont Trails and Greenway Council study, and it was KT, Catamount Trail, VASA, Green Mountain Club even, all partook in this. And through that study, we were able to prove that communities that were adjacent to and even en route to trail or outdoor recreation infrastructure have an incredible economic impact. And Kingdom Trails alone in this region, in the NEK, has $10 million annually going in to the community. And I think there are numbers like 85% of those trail users are coming from out of state. 38% are Canadians, neighbors to the north. And percent of those guys are staying overnight, and they're spending money on lodging and food and gear and gallons of maple syrup. And that's not Kingdom Trails that's getting that money. That's people buying firewood for their campsite. that money's going directly back into the community. But I think even on a more broader scale than direct economic impact, outdoor recreation, along with the forest industry, can highlight these rural communities especially as a place to live, work, and play, all in the same spot. You can be a forester and then ride your bike later that day. And we saw that in the pandemic. We did lose our Canadian visitors for 2 years, which was detrimental to our economy. However, we did find that people were moving in, and because the value they had, the renewed value they had on their quality of life kind of came to fruition during the pandemic. This is where they wanted to be, wanted to work, and wanted everything at their fingertips. And I just think that's really powerful, especially in the Northeast Kingdom, because this is the most socially and economically challenged area of our state, and our population has been in decline. So I do see it as uplifting a community in a broader sense than just the economy. So with that, we'll of course open it up to our audience, but do you guys have any, maybe some final words that weren't mentioned that would foster collaborations between the outdoor recreation industry and the forest industry?
Well, I've thought about that, and I think that there's a lot of education that needs to be done, because I think there's a lot of misunderstanding. And unfortunately, I didn't get to hear the keynote, but yeah, I think that when people see a logging operation, it's hard for them to understand what that means. Trees take a long time to grow. When they come down, it's a huge impact. And I think that there may be opportunities through our recreation channels to somehow educate people on that. Whether it's educating people at a retail store, maybe when they're shopping for a new bike or their hiking boots, and getting that retail owner to buy into this whole concept of education. And I think there's a lot of opportunity in trailheads to educate people as well. People are going to trails to go mountain biking or hiking. We've got signboards there. I think there might be an opportunity to explain to people just exactly what's going on when they see that logging operation. And then of course, maybe putting signs up at work sites where logging is taking place, just to explain to people, this is what's going on, this is what it looks like now, this is why it looks like it does now, but this is what it's going to look like in 10 years, in 20 years, and why it's being done. I think that there's a lot of questions around the why, I expect, because people freak out when they see that happen. So I think there's probably great opportunity for both of these industries to work together to educate people that this is what's needed to make a healthy forest. And again, without a healthy forest backdrop here, our recreation industry isn't worth all that much. And then that's going to impact the local coffee shops and restaurants and everything else. Again, everything being connected. And then I'm wondering if there isn't more to be done around, and I speak out of ignorance here, forgive me, but with sawmills and introducing people to sawmills. I'm fascinated by factories of any sort, and I wonder if there isn't how we have open house days for maple syrup producers, if there isn't an open day for people to come and check out sawmills or biomass plants, things like that. So just a few ideas. I was thinking about how do we connect this, which clearly should be connected, and I'm surprised we haven't talked about it more over the years. So I'm glad we're here doing it.
Absolutely.
Well, Cal queued me up perfectly. I will put a little plug in for 3 o'clock tomorrow if anyone would like to join me and a few of my staff members on a bike or a walk. We're hosting as part of this conference out at our Moose Haven Trail area, but we have educational signage out throughout that network that actually does educate and share and has photos of beautiful graphics of the logging operation and what took place and the process that we went through and how some trails actually came out of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But
Absolutely.
I won't take over from the panelists.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think creating a platform that people can come together and voices in the room. So it's amazing that that we are invited to a forestry summit. Vice versa, if there's a trails or recreation summit, inviting the foresters and the loggers to engage. And it really does take the voices in the room. If those voices aren't there, those collaborations don't happen a lot of the times. And so I think at the very base, we need to see a little bit more availability for voices to come together in that same room to work together. And I think there's some misconceptions about both industries, about like long-term use and pushing more people in the woods, or short-term environmental impacts of the actual harvesting. And I think that the more that we can work together, we can help each other kind of, foster a more sustainable view and approach to how we look at the woods and how we use the woods, both in the short term for the timber and the long term for recreation or wildlife. And so it's great to see more of these events. And that's one thing with Apex Trailworks that I'm trying very hard to engage more, like kind of across the line. I'm not a logger, but I do cut a lot of trees in the woods. They're just smaller trees. And so trying to educate myself, in turn trying to educate others that I come in contact with in the woods. And so I think, between chainsaw safety, that's super important. There's more and more people that are going out on volunteer work days because these groups have more trails to maintain. And so this weekend, Apex Trailworks is going to host the Northeast Woodland Training Game of Logging Level 1 and 2 in the Braintree Mountain Forest. We've worked very close with the New England Forestry Foundation on a tract of land in the Braintree Mountain Forest to enhance the recreation opportunities and not interfere with their long-term timber and wildlife goals there as well. And it's been a great collaboration. We've been very transparent with all the work we've done, and they've been in turn very receptive and welcoming with the recreation component in the Braintree Mountain Forest. And in turn, the community has reaped the benefits of this wonderful environmental and recreational opportunity to go out and see and experience a working forest out there. And so the more we can work together, more voices in the room, the better. And I'm all for it. I'm going to try my best to continue that.
Sam? Last words?
I don't know. I've had a relationship with wood products for a long time. I've grown up in an old farm in Brookfield, Vermont, and we used to cut and split 13 cord of wood a winter. And so I understand forest management and thinning, and I feel like I've tried to be a student of that industry from a young age. But I learn stuff all the time. Picked up Commissioner Snyder's book last year, and you flip through that collection of essays, and you'll gain a wealth of information that you never had before, just on what kind of all the different facets of a woodlot. And I value it, and I think it's a great opportunity for Vermont to leverage our existing assets and create opportunities for economies to grow, but also for us to really pay attention to, what our impact is on the land. So with that, I'm thankful to be here. If you guys didn't know what to get your father for Father's Day, pretty obvious.
The absolute best fitting gloves ever.
Sorry, I'm a little shameless.
So I'm also very thankful to be here as probably the smallest business you'll run across at an event like this. And I also have learned a ton about the forest industry in my business, right? I never set out to sell a pair of skis. I just wanted to build something for myself. But to build the best product I can for my customers, I've had to educate myself about, for example, the properties of the different types of woods that I'm going to be using so that I can tailor these skis to something that performs as expected or better than expected. And so in that way, even today, just listening to the people here, it's been eye-opening to me of the impact that is possible from a business perspective when you take your own business and you think about, well, how do I fit into that bigger picture? It's quite eye-opening, and it's something that I'm very happy to be here today and have learned. So thank you for listening.
And just to summarize, I think I want to pull on what Zach said, the word voices, and that's kind of a thought I want to leave you with is communication. I think that truly is how the two industries can continue to collaborate successfully. Dave, I'm going to use you as an example, but it really does start with just talking to each other. It starts with that private landowner. What are their goals for their property? And are those goals prioritized? Is wildlife first, and then recreation, and then a sustainable timber harvest? So understanding what they want, and then pulling their forester in to my office and sitting with our trail director, looking at the maps, like taking inventory of what trails are there and where the harvest is going to be, making sure the logging trucks, skidders, cross the trails at a 90-degree angle, and that our trail director was out there flagging the heck out of them before, so the logger knows exactly where they're going. And then, when it's all said and done, and the equipment and the machines are out of there, our trail crew's out there helping clean up, and again, circling back to what I shared at the beginning about Kingdom Trails, how we were founded on wood logging roads, maybe through that mess after the logging operation, which you guys know it's not a mess, but that's kind of what Hal said. It looks a little messy. New trails can be born, or new wildlife habitat can be born. And so I think it just really starts with making sure everyone's on the same page, communicating with each other, and then it will just be successful for both industries and, most importantly, the private landowner. So that's where I see us all coming together.
And I think it's important too, because it's kind of a sliding scale of larger entities like yourself that have the manpower, and the hours and the paid staff to spend that time, all the way down to the small projects, and they're both equally as important, because that voice and that connection between the landowner, the logger, and maybe even the volunteer trail builder, that's equally as important as everybody, like in your position, everybody's paid and the time is well spent and it's well thought out. It's crucially important that we look and work the same way, or try to at least strive to work, in varying degrees of the outcome or the size of the property. If it's 5 acres or 500, the importance is still the same. The value of that communication is still the same. And so continue to try and communicate the best we can.
Questions, guys? Michael, we come around.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Well, thank you, each of you, for all of that. It's really terrific, and I'm lucky to have gotten to know most of you, and so I know that what you speak is true of these ethics you're reflecting and your interest in getting it right, ecological integrity, and whether it's talking about owning your carbon footprint, SAM, or your sourcing of materials, or which wood products, tuning into the Emerald Ash Borer, you're aware, and it's clear, and I thank you for that. My question then is, beyond that is, what would be even better is if beyond your personal ethics that you're applying in your businesses this way regarding the environment and community, what would be even better is beyond your personal, is that you are doing it because you're smart business people and it's what the market is asking for. Is that the case? Then you have customers that want to know the story of these skis.
Absolutely.
And that matters
Absolutely.
across the board. So any of you want to speak to that in any particular way would be.
So I absolutely have customers because my ski is built in Vermont. I've had people find me on Instagram or the web somewhere, and they email me and they say, I want your ski because you're an East Coast skier, you understand what East Coast trees and tree skiing is like, and you use Vermont wood. I want your ski. Absolutely, that is 100% true. I've had that happen. It happens every year in my customer base, so it's absolutely valuable.
And I agree too. I think with the massive uptick in recreation use, the massive uptick of optics, of social media, Instagram and Facebook, there's more eyes on projects. There's more, it's undeniable the numbers have gone up. And so with that comes, well, wait, hold on. We're pushing so many more folks into the woods. What's that long-term impact? What does the short-term and long-term impact of that look like? And so from trail builders to trail organizations, that puts more pressure on us to communicate and relay the stewardship message, the ethics, the receipts, I guess. Maybe it's telling me something. But it just puts more pressure on us to do the right thing and to communicate with the users, because sometimes the users that are either on vacation or in the next town up, they don't have that same ownership and the connection to the land that they're in and the forest that they're in. You go somewhere else and you leave a small chunk of yourself behind, and you're like, rah, let's go party and let's have fun. And with that, you forget about some things. So I think it's crucially important with the increase in numbers to continue to push that message and push it harder than ever right now, because it's not just here in Vermont. You pretty much throw a dart at the map, recreation in forests are blowing up all over the place, and so we as an industry are facing that, and I think it's an incredibly valuable and important conversation to have for the longevity and the sustainability of both of our industries work in harmony. And most important thing is the ecosystem and how we protect that too. I think that mindset of protecting, because if we don't have that, as Hal said, we don't survive. We can't survive the air, the water, all that stuff. So trying very hard to continue to push that message.
I have a sort of a demand side question. So I think local food people have done an awesome thing. Everybody wants to go to the farmer's market and get their awesome tomatoes. That's pretty high touch. Like once a week you go to market, change your thing. It's awesome. Wood products, we have a lot of trouble with that. Like everybody gets lots of firewood. They tend to know who their firewood person is. But there's not a lot of, or your pellet guy or whatever it might be. There's not a lot of high touch. Yeah. But from a forestry perspective, like I'm not particularly interested in growing a lot of firewood. Like I want to grow that wood.
Yeah.
Right? So question kind of for you guys, like, you're selling a glove, like I bought my dad a pair of gloves for Christmas last year. They're awesome. But I'm not going to buy another pair of those gloves for, he's probably going to die with those gloves, right? That's the idea. So that's kind of like a high-test pair of skis, or a really nice cabinet, or just something that's really long-lived. So it's sort of a demand-side question. How do we get local wood, or the cedar on? Our company cuts a lot of locust and sells it for trail building stuff. Because it's super high demand, super high value. How do we build that demand side? Like I assume both of your products are pretty high end. There's probably unlimited demand out there because there's pretty small production, a fair bit of money in the world, a lot of people want them. I assume the wood in your business, like, I probably send more wood from one forwarder load than you use in a year.
Yeah.
And so there's like, how do we get that local wood supply to be a little more high touch and a little more demand side? And I wonder if you have experience like selling gloves in that kind of a similar market where people are not necessarily getting it every day or every week.
Yeah, certainly. Supply and demand has an opportunity to create premium products. We're a premium product, we can't make enough of it. And we have to have these hard conversations with our utility customers and the big electrical companies that we produce gloves for, because we do them at a different price point than we sell them to consumers. And we have to have these hard conversations around the fact that for us to be able to offer you these gloves at this price, we need X number of units per year to be able to sell to this industry at a premium price. It helps balance our business. And just like you were saying about, we don't want to grow firewood, we want to grow the veneers. Same thing, you have to have the balance of those two, I think, is necessary in our business, certainly. From a cash flow perspective, we need to have some big contracts, but from a margin perspective and being able to do the things that we want to do for our employees, for our company to keep moving us forward, we also have to have this other premium side of it. And at the same, a lot of times there's people who are like, that's an outrageously expensive glove at $100 per pair. But what we do is we spend a lot of time on education and giving them that value proposition. It's like you can go through 5, 6 pairs of Kinkos, or you can go through 1 pair of ours. And it doesn't, it's whether you have them for 1 month or whether you have them for 30 years, it's a value prop that we spend a lot of time on educating the consumer around. And so we have a lot of people in the trade sector who are like, yeah, I'm running a chain binder all the time and I tear up gloves, but here's the ones that are going to last the longest, so that that works. But,
From my perspective, again, here's my thing. I think there is a larger opportunity for the ski industry in Vermont based on that. Imagine, if you will, a custom ski builder on a mountain road somewhere. Let's just take this one, with traffic going by all the time and a sign out front, building skis today. How many people would stop just to see that? And just be like, huh, what does that mean?
What does that look like?
What does that look like? And then how many of those people could you turn into customers? There is opportunity there, and I've had more than a decade to think about this. There is opportunity based on the quality that I'm turning out. And yeah, it would be great to partner, having that dovetailed in and partnered with a lumber mill or a forester that goes and gets me the wood that we're looking for, right? That this product is 90% Vermont, right? That would be fantastic. I think that opportunity exists. It just takes money.
It also takes somebody that crafts a story in the right way. I think there's a storytelling component to that people love a good story from start to finish. And so if it's skis or gloves or a trail or a forest-related product in the outdoor sector, as a lot of companies are hiring social media people, that's the new link to getting your message out there. That's the important branding, the image of what your product is, what your ethics are behind it, why you do it, and what the process is from start to finish. And through that, the authenticity, if you can present it in a very authentic way, that goes a long way in the value added to your forest product. If it's the handle of a McLeod that comes from the firefighting industry, that's ash or hickory, where did that handle come from? What's the process for Rogue Tools to get that handle from the woods to the tool to the trail builder back to the woods? Like, there's an opportunity to tell that story because that's what people like. And sometimes it's like the monetary value's not there, but through the story, it connects the dots for folks, and that adds value to it. And you see some of it, but I think there's enormous opportunity in this like shifting landscape that we see in the world of the internet. Is like it changes every day, and more folks are going to online and the internet, and so it's something to consider. And I'm trying to do it, and these guys are trying to do it, and so that's a little snippet there.
I would also offer that everything you all just said is absolutely right on. And all that is even more so in the younger generation. It's even more so there. They demand that the products they buy have an ethical story to it, a sustainability story, all that kind of thing. And they're very adamant about that. So I think that's great. And that also is our future consumer market, if you will, for whether it's a wood product or certainly what have you.
A lot of our trends, we need to look at the youth, like what are the youth like, and how can we target market to them, because that's that next generation, and the youth all use social media. Like, so we need to go to that to really curate that. I think there's incredible value to that.
And they're the ones that are going to help us get out of the mess that we're in.
Yeah, and the more authentic and the more sustainable that we can push that message and be real about it, there's a wonderful trickle-down effect to the youth. That they see that, they feel that, they admire that from the elders. I'm 45, so I'm pushing that elder stage. So, anyways.
Any other questions?
Maybe one comment and one question. From Maine, over from Maine, so it's one other place where, I love it. I've never been there. Probably second one. But I work for the family office of a large landowner, and in fact, they own 1.3 million acres in Maine, which is a lot of land, the largest landowner there. They also have some holdings over in Vermont. They're very responsible landowner. They want to be good stewards of the land there. But the scale is very different. One thing I'm really struck by your comments and the We Hope comments is, Vermont does a great job of making connecting everything, and I think Vermont has a great opportunity and sense of scale, because so you can make the forest work with a small cottage industry or any of those. So it all works really well. So that's just sort of a comment that how much I like getting over to Vermont, and what a good job you do with growing these small industries. And then the other, I guess the question is, there's the Maine Outdoor Council or whatever group that is, it runs an interesting ad campaign, we're saying. It's something along the nature of 50% of Maine land, the Maine Northwoods, is privately owned, and 80% of that has public access. And I'm going to guess it'd be something like that in Vermont, only the landowners are smaller, but and the gist of the ad campaign is, your guests on the property use it, responsibly, and I think it's really important. And just driving over here, I was reflecting on the fact that I think that there's less of a tension between the landowner and the recreational use. I think we're good with that, and we're getting better with it as the demand is. Increasingly, the tension is between the different recreational uses. And so I think everybody here is talking about non-motorized uses, or that's what we think of when we think of the land blending in with the community and that type of thing, but a lot of it, the tension between ATV use versus bike use and all that. So it's, as I say, it's just odd, and I'm not sure if that's the same thing here. I don't think the tension is as much between the landowner or determining the use as the the recreational users.
I would love to comment on that.
Take that one.
So it's not all hunky-dory, and I think Kingdom Trails, we can share our story. Almost 3 years ago now, we did have some challenges. As I shared, we're made up of 104 private landowners, and we had 3 landowners restrict access. And earlier I shared about that tremendous economic impact, and we acknowledge that's wonderful, but we also acknowledge that that places tremendous stress and pressure on our very small rural infrastructure. You all came through downtown Eastburg. It's not much. There's not even a crosswalk. So we had some major congestion, major safety issues with the amount of trail users that were coming to Kingdom Trails. And basically it came to a head when those private landowners restricted access. They felt that they didn't have their privacy anymore. They didn't have control of their land. And they just wanted to enjoy it as they should, honestly. I always am an optimistic at heart and look at the silver linings, and I do think it was a blessing in disguise. It forced our hand, and quite honestly, the entire state, the country saw what was happening at Kingdom Trails and took note. And I do think we've struck a little bit of a balance from the improvements we've made. I think it goes back to that communication. We really need to be listening to our landowners, to our community, and letting them guide us. And we need to be educating our trail users or any recreation user about how to respectfully act and behave when recreating. So what was born out of this process was a code of conduct, basically, called Ride with Gratitude, Recreate with Gratitude. And I do see you have Northern Forest Center hat.
Just a quick follow-up comment is I wear 2 hats for whatever, but I've been on the board with Northern Forest Center for several years. We had our first in-person board meeting was last month in Gore, New Hampshire, and we're just having a symposium of ATV.
Yeah.
They have great bike trails, not of the scale you have here, but then there's this huge implosion of ATV, and this economic development, they want them all come in, but then careful what you wish for. And I'll just say quickly that it came up in our board discussion on the whole thing that we're borrowing on some of the community people there that have been involved in that. It's kind of using, sort of like we're a couple of years behind, the Kingdom Trails. You're working through these issues. We're looking to them for guidance and experience, because it's a.
And that's what we did. We looked to the Northern Forest Center for help. And Bike Borderlands is a subset of the Northern Forest Center, and that's a mountain bike collaborative from Maine all the way to the Adirondacks, even Quebec. And so together, because we know our voices are stronger together, not just Kingdom Trails out willy-nilly doing their own thing, came together and created that Recreate and Ride with Gratitude code of conduct about respectful behavior and having examples of what that looks like. And it's the recreation opportunities job, in my eyes. It's our responsibility to educate the trail users that it's actually Dave is one of our foresters and one of our landowners. I keep pointing to him, but one of the foresters for many of our landowners. So we work together. But he's the one who dubbed it's not a right for them to come and recreate. It's a privilege, because in the end, 70% of outdoor recreation opportunities in Vermont are on private land. And so we really need to recognize that they are the backbone of our opportunities here.
And I'll just say the signage is sensational. It really, you cannot but think about that this is a privilege. This is not right. So I commend you. That's awesome.
And I'll add one thing too. It's amazing that an event like this draws folks from all around, and you guys decided to drive from Maine to come this.
Every opportunity to
in Randolph last night at our very small event, but similar message. A couple drove from Maine as well, just to small little free event in Randolph. And they got in the car and drove, and they left. They were incredibly grateful that they spent that time to come, learn, and they're going to take that message back with them. So the more that we can host events like this, both big and small, it helps share this message and foster this uniform.
Certainly for the Northern Forest Center in the region would be the Adirondacks, the Northeast Kingdom, New Hampshire, north of the Notches, and the basically, Maine loop north. So that economic region where different scales and everyone's, they all know each other. They're also so very different. But, and I also know that the plenary session tomorrow is the main tradition of economic development and an example of the GoLab project in Madison, which is it's repurposing all these. I think that's a great idea to have an open house and meals. I mean, you just nobody knows.
Absolutely.
And you're right, how they are fascinating.
Yeah.
Please.
Thanks. So this is really great. It's got my wheels spinning in really interesting ways. And I also really liked the reference to Leopold II of you made. And I clearly hear the land ethic, your own personal land ethics coming through in all your answers. And I guess to build on Mike's question, I think I heard you say, Zach, that yes, there is space to create more thought and ethic for users coming into the woods as they're coming more and more often. I heard you talk about using stories. I heard others talk about connecting with the ethic of the younger generation. I hear the code of conduct pieces. What else should we be doing to create relationship with land for recreational users?
Dan, I've seen you since before pandemic. And you're sparking my answer. Dan is our forester. I do still work for the Vermont Land Trust, yes. So Kingdom Trails has conserved almost 400 acres now through the Vermont Land Trust holds our conservation easements. Up on Darling Ridge, you can actually see the ridge of these windows. And I feel that could be another way to strengthen those collaborations. So the recent capital campaign that we just hosted was 240 acres. And there's 7 miles of trails. There's also a vast motorized snow machine trail that goes through it as well. But it also has incredible productive agriculture lands on there, haying fields, and there's and we had a sustainable timber harvest plan, actually one that will probably be happening this winter. But it was the trails and our trail users that raised the funds, over $600,000 in days, to get that land conserved. And so I feel like we tapped into the outdoor recreation side very heavy, even though it was just 7 miles of trails. But in the end, 240 acres were now conserved in perpetuity. And there for our community to enjoy forever. So I feel we could even tie in, there's the forest industry is now supported by this property because of the timber harvest that will be on it. Wildlife habitat's on it. The farmers will even enjoy it from the hay that's on there, and the outdoor recreationists will be able to enjoy it. And then the community members, the landscape will be able to also be enjoyed forever. I mean, we had caught wind of a 10-house development was going up there, and we knew that would be detrimental to not only our trail system, but to our community and the landscape. And so I feel like outdoor rec can come together with these other industries, including conservationists, and almost join forces to just success.
I think, go ahead. Just kind of thinking a little bit outside the box here. Our geographical location so close to so many millions of people to the south of us that are in a landscape that is so different than up here in north. You know, farms, ag, mountains, you know, remoteness. There's an opportunity, I think, for our states to collectively come together and almost like put forth an ad campaign about ethics and trail use and recreation, and putting it out as a collective northern communities group of states, and just kind of thinking outside the box of how do you educate people outside of your area. Yes, it's one thing when people come in, they see signs, it's wonderful, that's like the point of contact, but you know, maybe there's something on the subway in New York City. Maybe there's something on a bus, on the inside of a bus or the outside of a bus in Boston that has that little one-liner with, you know, something that really plants that seed. The more that we can plant seeds in these massive areas, and yes, it costs a lot of money to do that, but I think, you know, and we're sort of starting to see that in the outdoor, the outdoor retailer sector, is they're starting to push responsibility and ethics ad campaigns out there. They have for a long time, but I think there's more pressure on people now because the user numbers are going up. So we need to be creative on how we can push the message out just outside of our local little pods to the masses. And there's opportunity there to create larger impacts with people outside of our zones. I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but just thinking outside the box there.
I think this is a great question. I did want to come back to Mike's question and field that, so I thank you for asking it. I think it's great to do all these mindful things for the land and whatnot, but I think at the end of the day, the reality of the situation is that the average person may not be as vested, may not have the same moral obligation as those of us in this building right now. So I think anything we can do as a group or a community to tie to the economic benefit, whether that's in an abstract way or in a trickle-down way, or whether it's in a direct impact way. We work with Vermont Land Trust quite a bit down in Randolph as a family in our farming enterprise, and there was a big development project that was going to take place at Exit 4 in this big open land space, and no farmer in the a budding landowner would come to the hearing and testify the economic impact of taking that amount of prime ag land out of current use, and what that impact has on the entire region of the farming community. So anyways, my brother ended up doing that and being that person, but it required for the community to get on board with not having a hotel go in there. They really needed to see the economic impact of that. And going back to Mike's question about, like, yes, as the son of a climate activist, like how I was going to burn coal in my factory after having the opportunity to take it over. But with that said, we were a failing business. We were tying everything together on a shoestring. We couldn't just go do a boiler changeover and become a net zero manufacturer without making the numbers work. So, like, that's a big piece of the puzzle, is having that financial piece transparent, visible, and driving the argument. We all know how elections get decided. It's based on the economy. I think getting the masses to fully invest in what we believe in our missions, then there's a level of that needs to be.
Coming back to, I think, the individual user, I think, based off something you said, I think part of the breakdown is when somebody buys a ticket, whether that's a skier or a mountain biker or a fast trail user, they have a certain sense of entitlement because they paid money. And I think the education of the individual users, I mean, I see it, I'm a skier, so the thing that drives me the craziest is when I'm on the lift and I see beer cans and little shot bottles of thrown under, of Fireball thrown under the lift, and it drives me crazy. And I know it's not the locals. I know it's not the locals. I know it is people who are visiting. And the education of those people, there's got to be a way to get to them, but I don't have the answer to that. But
You don't push them off the list?
I wish I could. Oh, I wish I could. Or I wish I would see somebody and I would let them know. But the education of the user, the individual user, is so important, because I think when they put their money down, they have a certain sense of entitlement, whether it's encroaching on a landowner or throwing their trash under the lift or throwing their fishing line on the side of the river when they're done with it, you know, or their worm container, whatever it is. I'm a fly fisherman, so those things, I see them and they drive me crazy, and it comes down to the education and the stewardship of the land. And I don't have the answer to that, but I just wanted to kind of point that out.
Well, and it dovetails into the action too. If you see somebody doing something, like, we can't be afraid to speak up, you know, even if that upsets somebody. We have to have that within all of us and call them out if we see something that's blatantly wrong. I was up on Camel's Hump, and there was 3 little kids, 10, 12, this was last year, and they were jumping over the white strings on Camel's Hump, all over the tundra. And I was like, I'm not having any of it. I told them, and they thought I was the crazy guy, you know? And I was like, no, you guys. And I calmed down. At first, the older kid was upset, and we calmed down, and I spoke to him about slow growth and all that stuff. And by the time they left, it was a quick little interaction, but you can tell that that seed was planted in them, and they stepped across the line and stayed on the rocks and walked back to the other side. Then the dad probably gave me the middle finger or something.
They went on with a great story about the crazy
Maybe
guy.
Tom.
Right, the crazy guy. That's crazy.
Even thought twice, really.
I know, right? But no, those things like that. I think it's on all of us as good stewards of the land to speak up when we see something that's not right.
That is one of the pillars of Ride with Gratitude, and I feel silly, I should have brought some stickers, is be the example, and there's, you know, little descriptions underneath each pillar, and the be the example description does say, a gentle call out will do.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think done the right way can be very educational and productive. It's after 5. I can stay here all night, but.
The one last thing I would offer, I don't know the answer to your question, but I suspect it lies somewhere in the private sector. I think that as we go forward and things grow and everything evolves, I think that there's got to be more private-public partnerships to solve some of these issues. Government has only so many skills and so much ability to solve these problems, and I think it's going to be incumbent upon all of us as private citizens, but also for the folks that, you know, I would point out, like Patagonia, the North Face, folks like that who are making money on all this gear, that they're going to have to step up to the plate too and help us with some of these issues. So I think that the answer lies somewhere in there. I don't know what it is though.
When they start to see that monetary value in spending money on the message, and that's super important. And and we're beginning to see that, and that will continue the more, because there's a trickle down effect, and if that guy's doing it or that company, they'll do it, and the more that do it, the message will get out.
And there's a value to them to be associated with our stories here in Vermont. That's how I see it. It's good for their bottom line to be associated with a place like Vermont. And so the more they can be involved from a monetary standpoint, but also from a storytelling standpoint, I think it would be, starting to solve some of those issues maybe.
And then also I'll add too, like, I think it would be helpful from the forestry and logging industry to help spread that message as well. You know, sometimes that industry doesn't necessarily think about the next phase of use of that land. Their job ends, more the loggers, when they do the closeout, their job is, and, they wash their hands, they're done. But there might be, again, that communication piece of long-term use of that forest. What does that look like? And helping us share their message and vice versa is a win-win for everybody and the ecosystem as well.
Well, thank you guys. So grateful.